A lot of people are very angry with Ezra Klein.
Oh my God, I hate Ezra Klein.
Basically saying, some people's humanity is up for debate, actually, so we can win the game.
We're saying we have a big tent, but the tent only extends to the center and to the right.
This person has no one that is close to them that has had a very marginalized experience.
A Buddhist meditation just popped into my head.
The controversy began when, in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's killing, Ezra Klein, a New York Times commentator, wrote an article in which he said Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way. He followed up by interviewing controversial right-winger Ben Shapiro and writing about how we are going to have to live here with one another. And then, soon after that, in another interview, he argued for
taking political positions that'll make it more likely to win Senate seats in Kansas and Ohio and Missouri, trying to open your coalition to people you didn't want it open to before, running pro-life Democrats.
There was a furious backlash to all this. Numerous people commentating on TikTok and the phrase doing politics the right way becoming a kind of meme for wrong-headed naivety. The strongest attack came from Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote a blistering attack on Ezra Klein, comparing Klein's article to the whitewashing of the Southern cause after the Civil War. There is a central question behind this whole controversy. How should the Democrats win power? And Klein's answer to that question is usually known in politics as moderating or moving to the center. For many on the left, however, this is both betrayal and strategic error, and the fact this influential commentator is making this argument is infuriating. But given how important it is to stop what's happening in America, we on the left, and I mean the broad left, liberals, progressives, Democrats, we need to get this right. And so in this video, I'm going to look at a conversation between Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates, where these two viewpoints came head to head. I'll set out the arguments on both sides and give my perspective, and hopefully all of this can get us closer to working out whether moving to the center is a betrayal or actually the way to win.
Before we start, I want to show you something that has given me a new perspective on the politics I cover on this channel. I'm in Spitalfields in East London because of today's sponsor, MyHeritage, the leading family history platform. It has access to more than 36 billion historical records. And once you add yourself, your parents and your grandparents, it usually finds a whole set of ancestors. Okay, here we are. These are some of the many houses that were built for Huguenot silk weavers, people it turns out I am related to. For example, this is the marriage certificate of my great-great-great-grandparents married right here in Spitalfields. And this is Pierre Le Cerf, who came here in 1682 because he guessed that soon Protestants like him would be kicked out of France because of their religion. This resonated with me because I've made lots of videos about MAGA types who claim that liberalism is empty and it's just everyone doing their own thing. But it's easy to forget that liberalism came about partly because of religious persecution against religious minorities, people like the Huguenot silk weavers on these streets. Given we can't all agree on things like religious belief, sometimes people just doing their own thing is the best system. I've been really enjoying using MyHeritage. There's this feature called Instant Discoveries that suddenly adds whole new branches on my family tree, and it's cool using the AI tools to bring old photos back to life. I really recommend checking it out. There's a 14-day free trial, so there's nothing to lose. Scan the QR code or click the link, and thank you to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video.
Let's jump into the disagreement. You wrote a column responding to my column on Charlie Kirk.
Which is so uncomfortable.
It's okay.
The conversation starts with Ta-Nehisi Coates explaining why he attacked Ezra Klein.
When I went past my initial impressions and started like going through all of the clips of the things he said, the way he talked about people, the way he described groups in ways that honestly, even as I was writing it, I was uncomfortable saying.
Ezra Klein gives a couple of defenses, but what emerges in the conversation is that Ezra Klein actually believes there's something the left can learn from Charlie Kirk.
Going in, having debates, using them opportunistically. A lot of people have thrown back at me that, oh, he wasn't debating to find truth. Of course he wasn't debating to find the truth. He was doing politics. He was trying to persuade people.
But for Coates, Klein went too far.
And then I see their content. And I see that their content is actively destructive to humanity. I have to draw a line there.
In a way, Ezra Klein's article is itself a reply to that question. How should the Democrats win power? Ezra Klein believes the left should reach out to conservative viewers, and that's partly why he wrote a respectful article about Charlie Kirk, whereas Coates is saying you can't compromise on certain moral principles. You must hold the line.
For Haitian immigrants that are in, Ohio, who are living under the weight of this, for trans kids who, are dealing with, being, I don't even want to use the term bullied, beaten up, attacked, threatened. It's very, very important to me, given the post I have, to say, I see you, but also, this dude was wrong. And I'm all for unifying, I'm all for bridging gaps, but not at the expense of my neighbor's humanity. I just can't.
In other words, Coates is saying you shouldn't betray the vulnerable to win power. A lot of those criticising Klein echoed this critique, as well as also making what we might call the easy for you to say argument, that Klein's privilege is what allows him to hold this position. As we saw earlier, Klein had mused about running pro-life candidates in Kansas and Ohio and Missouri, yet as many critics pointed out, these states have recently voted to support abortion rights. In the conversation, Klein admits those weren't the red states he meant, but says the point stands. Though for Coates, the fact he stumbled on his facts is revealing.
I think the problem with musing about that is abandoning it is a very real possibility for people who don't have the option necessarily to fly to another state or do X, Y, and Z. So I suspect when they hear somebody of your status, even if it's not the example you mean, putting it out in the air. I guess what I want from you is I want you to take as seriously people who are in the tent and who are vulnerable and afraid. And if you have to convince them of something that's extremely, extremely uncomfortable, or tell them that you're taking a position that is extremely uncomfortable, I just think you owe them a little more.
Okay, so there's the first argument. Don't betray the vulnerable for power. The next moment I want to highlight comes when Klein asks Coates whether it makes sense to draw a line against Trump supporters given how many there are.
I'm saying, what happens if 35% of the country, 40% of the country, the dominant political force in the country is inside that? Does that change anything? Or no, like the line just holds?
No, I mean, welcome to Black America. That's our history. The line we have drawn in general has not been majoritarian politics, unfortunately.
It's a powerful moment. Ta-Nehisi Coates is approaching this question with a different perspective from Klein, one that remembers over 246 years of slavery, decades of segregation, the bloody backlash against the push for civil rights, and the continued treatment of black people to the present day.
Because any sort of sober examination of the history of this country says that those of us who believe in equality, those of us who believe in respecting the humanity of our neighbors and of, everyone, that we're up against some really, really powerful forces of history and powerful narratives.
In other words, Ezra Klein and people like him need to face reality. A reality that, if they truly considered, would remind them of the importance of staying true to moral principles.
I am descended from people who in their lifetime fought with all their might for the destruction of chattel slavery in this country. And they never saw it. They never saw it. In my personal belief system, they died in, defeat, in darkness, And so I guess the privilege that I draw out of this, the honor that I draw out of this, is not that things will necessarily be better in my lifetime, but that I will make the contribution that I am supposed to make.
So there's the second point, face reality. Okay, there's one more argument supporting the hold the line position that we need to cover. During the conversation, Coates is quite clear that he's not a strategist.
I just want to be clear about something. I shouldn't be running for president of the United States. You know what I mean? And my expectations for the rhetoric of writers, intellectuals, journalists, etc., is very, very different than what the expectation should be for people who expect to hold office.
But even without being a strategist, he can see holes in the idea that reaching out will actually work in winning power. He points out that there were times the Republicans were apparently doomed, but they came back, and that the election would have gone a different way if Biden had stood down earlier. In other words, before you panic and give up all your principles, it might not be so hard for the Democrats to re-win power. Many of Klein's other critics also give reasons why reaching out won't work, making arguments like there are few moderate, persuadable voters, that a better strategy is appealing to your base and getting votes there, and the best way to win is with bold, radical policies and moral clarity that will reach disengaged voters. In other words, reaching out doesn't work. Okay, if that's the case for holding the line, what is Ezra Klein's argument for reaching out? Well, it starts with power.
I think it means exploring things that are uncomfortable and being pretty disciplined in a way maybe I haven't been, about separating the question of what I believe from what I believe will win power. Because I currently think that the cost of losing power is horrifying and dangerous, and we can't keep doing it.
For Klein, you should weigh up the overall outcome. Yes, you might do some bad things, like having anti-abortion Democrats in the coalition, slowing down on trans rights, or writing respectful things about Charlie Kirk. But these negatives are outweighed by the bigger positive of having power. And you win power, so the theory goes, because most voters do not have radical left or right politics, but are in the middle. So, if you have two parties competing, a party that can shift from the edge towards the center will pick up more of the vote. Now, I don't here want to argue that Ezra Klein's specific proposals about anti-abortion Democrats and so on, that those are the right proposals. But I do want to argue that in principle, this is a morally valid way to approach politics. What we have here is a tension, an old tension, between two different ways of judging what, in politics, is the right thing to do. In fact, as far back as 1919, Max Weber described how, in politics, you have some who believe in an ethic of moral convictions, and others who believe in an ethic of responsibility. An ethic of conviction is what Ta-Nehisi Coates favours, prioritising the morality of your actions, telling the truth, not compromising on principle, and so on. Whereas an ethic of responsibility is more what Ezra Klein favours, happier to compromise on principles if the consequences are good enough. For Ezra Klein, a positive example of this focus on consequences is when Barack Obama basically lied about gay marriage.
In 2008, as you and I both know, Barack Obama ran as a public opponent of gay marriage.
Define marriage.
I believe that marriage is the union between a man and a woman. Now, for me as a Christian...
But he was playing politics. Right. That playing of politics allowed him to name Supreme Court justices, and that led to the decision that created a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. And I am saying that that kind of playing politics is needed.
In other words, although Barack Obama betrayed gay people in 2008, doing this helped him win power, and the result of that power was progress for gay rights. In other words, far from being a betrayal of the vulnerable, power is how you protect the vulnerable. Seen from this perspective, the easy for you to say critique can be flipped, with those prioritizing their own moral convictions guilty of forgetting the vulnerable. This certainly seems to be what Max Weber thought, describing many of those with an ethic of conviction as windbags puffed up with hot air about themselves, busy intoxicating themselves with romantic sensations. Now, personally, I don't think this critique either way is useful or fair. Ta-Nehisi Coates and those who argue for holding the line are clearly doing what they think is right, but then so are people of Ezra Klein's position, and I don't think it's useful for either side to accuse the other of acting from privilege or self-indulgence. And the truth is, most people combine these ideas. In their conversation, Ezra Klein admits there's lines he wouldn't cross, and Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about the compromises he's made. There's even a bit where he talks about how he appreciates FDR's New Deal, even though it left out black people.
Did FDR want to, in his heart, exclude black folks in the way that they were excluded from it? No. That was the price of getting the thing done. I understand that as politics.
Indeed, Max Weber himself said that the two ethics are not complete opposites, and that together they constitute the true human being, someone who has politics as a vocation. I think it's clear we need both instincts. We need power, but if we sell out completely, then you have that power and you don't achieve anything with it. For me, the tension is well captured by the twin statements, there's no point in principles without power, and there's no point in power without principles. The second point of Coates' argument was that Klein and people like him need to face reality.
Welcome to Black America. That's our history.
It's true that this is a powerful point, but I think I agree with Ezra Klein that this is in danger of being too pessimistic.
It's not enough to say, we lost, there are backlashes, sometimes you lose. I think it requires like a very fundamental rethinking, like a disciplined, strategic rethinking of what have we been doing? Why are people preferring this to us?
Coates' perspective is a powerful reminder that for much of America's history, there was little that could be done in the face of injustice. And in that context, it makes sense to me to focus on an ethic of moral convictions. Why be a consequentialist when the consequences are set in stone? But Trump is not a popular president, and America still has, at the moment at least, competitive elections Democrats could win. However, if Trump is unpopular, so is the Democrat Party. And just winning the presidency isn't enough. If Democrats want to pass policies like Obamacare, they need power in the Senate.
When Obamacare passes, there are Democratic senators in Arkansas, in Louisiana, in West Virginia, in Missouri, in Indiana, in North Carolina, in South Dakota, in North Dakota. And I've been thinking that I think for a lot of us, to twist a line about capitalism, it has become easier to imagine the end of the country than winning a Senate seat in Missouri or Arkansas. And I think that's a problem.
In other words, the reality is that the left can win power, but they'll need to do what's necessary to achieve that. Okay, we've said that compromising on principle to win power is morally defensible, and that winning power is possible, but these arguments presume that reaching out will actually win power. and of course many people think it won't. In essence, these people say there is no tension between an ethic of conviction and an ethic of responsibility. Personally, I'm skeptical of this argument, and originally I was going to go through some of these points, but Coates and Klein don't really get into this, partly because Coates believes his job is not focusing on winning power.
I shouldn't be running for president of the United States.
Instead then, I want to look at something more fundamental, because before we get into reaching out through policy positions, there's a question about how the left should think and act towards Trump supporters, and I think this clip captures it.
Whatever the definition of the line is.
Right.
What does it mean for you for somebody to be on the other side of it, right? Not somebody who just died.
Right.
But somebody still living.
Right. If you think it is okay to dehumanize people, then conversation between you and I is probably not possible.
I want to pause on this idea that a conversation is not possible. While I don't want to overstate Coates' position, he doesn't really push it very strongly in this conversation. Klein points out that this has become a common position on the left.
I think of the huge backlash to Bernie Sanders for going on Joe Rogan's show, because Rogan was transphobic, right? Such a big backlash that when I defended him, I became myself a Twitter trending topic.
Right.
To Elizabeth Warren for going on Bill Maher's show. Bill Maher's Islamophobic.
Right.
The first reason for this belief is moral principle. These are vile ideas and vile people, and they don't deserve to be interacted with. There's also the idea you can't convince these people, and the argument that refusing to talk sends a moral signal, refusing to legitimize these viewpoints by engaging with them. I disagree with all these arguments. First, I think the moral rejection of right-wing voters goes too far. I recently saw a poll which found approximately half of Liberal voters said it would be acceptable to cut off family members over opposing political views. I'm not going to say this is never justified, but I worry that we're heading into a kind of othering of our opponents in a way that's mirroring the worst of the right. At one point in the conversation, Klein plays the notorious clip of Clinton from 2016, when she talked about half of Trump's supporters being a basket of deplorables. In response, Ta-Nehisi Coates has a wonderful point.
I would never use that language. Jesus Christ. I don't even focus on people that, look, I am at war with certain ideologies and ideas, and I want them expunged. I want to turn them into phrenology. That's what I want. But I don't want the people, you know what I mean, out.
I think that's beautiful. Focus on the ideas, not the people. Second, although Trump has die-hard supporters, unlikely to be persuaded or able to change their minds, his coalition is also made up of those whose support is more conditional. As we saw earlier, Trump's polling has dropped since the election, and I think it's mad to say the Democrats can't convince anyone in this group. And finally, while refusing to talk might warm the passions of those who already agree with you, I think it's rarely persuasive to others.
Even before the question of what your policies are, and I believe this very deeply, there's a question of whether or not people feel like you respect them and like them, even if they disagree with you. Before I think people will give you power, they don't even ask, do they like you? They ask whether you like them. And I think a lot of the country feels we don't like them.
In other words, yes, it sends a signal, but it's a bad signal. For all those reasons, I think the left should lose this idea, but also because I think the left has the stronger arguments. That's why, as I argued in my video on the left-wing case for free speech, the left has a strong history of supporting free speech because we can use and have used speech to win. And I think the fact this meme doesn't really exist on the right gives it a huge advantage. Consider, conservatives like Kirk think abortion is murder, and yet they don't refuse to debate people who support abortion rights. And that's one of the ways they win and keep power. I've spent time on this question about whether a conversation is possible because it's emblematic of a wider attitude.
I think in many ways we've stopped doing politics. We've written a lot of people off. And in writing them off, we are losing and we are unable to protect ourselves, unable to protect them, just unable to make good change in the world.
I agree with Ezra Klein on this. It's not reaching out that doesn't work, it's writing people off. And until the left finds a way to see, to talk to people with different politics, even awful politics, it will find it harder to win power. Okay, thank you for watching this centre-left liberal with glasses defend another centre-left liberal with glasses. Though he's been wearing them less, you know, beard, tattoos. Maybe I need to get a glow up as well. So look, I know many people find Ezra Klein frustrating, but if you hated that, then you can also watch this video on free speech, which is also probably infuriating. Or you can hate me by joining my Substack and smashing that subscribe button. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Maybe I'll see some of you in the comments, and until the next one.